Welcome to my drawer of shame, my shame drawer, where I stash all of my failed, ugly, embarrassing paintings. I've been an artist now for about 4 years, and even though I didn't start from absolute scratch, I have been drawing and painting sporadically throughout my life. It wasn't until around 2021 that I started taking art seriously, that I started practicing more deliberately, started studying art on my own, started producing a lot of drawings and paintings. A lot of failed drawings and paintings, some of which I thought I would share with you today. There is a tendency among us artists to only want to share our best work online. It's normal, it's natural, it's completely okay to want to put your best foot forward, so to speak. But I also feel like it gives kind of the wrong impression of what being an artist is like, what developing as an artist looks like. Not everything you make is going to please you. Not everything you make is going to be good. A lot of what you make is going to be very bad. If you produce enough artwork, you're going to hate a lot of it. And I firmly believe in learning from one's mistakes in order to get better faster. So without further ado, let me give you a tour of some of the ugliest art I have ever made. And let's analyze it and maybe talk about what I could have done differently or what I would do differently today. Some of these paintings are going to be from years ago when I was a less practiced artist, and some of them are going to be very recent. And I do just want to say one thing before I start. Everything I say in this video is my personal opinion about my art, based off of my tastes and my particular art goals. Alright, let's do this. So apparently we're starting off with a bunch of chihuahuas. These are all my mom's dog, and for some reason I have really struggled with capturing her. Dogs are really hard, okay? So here we see some of the very typical signs of a beginner watercolorist. It's this overemphasis of lines and tiny little details, and as you can see here, I used ink pen here to sort of emphasize the details of the fur even more, and here I've actually used a gel pen. For some reason I thought it very important to capture the tiny little hairs in her ear. And it's all just to the detriment of the overall result. I have finally learned that over years of watercolor painting, that more details does not equal a better painting. Quite the opposite, actually. And also the colors of these are really bland. There's no depth to the colors at all. Here's another attempt. What is this crust? Oh, okay. I've just rubbed this paper too hard. This is very cheap paper, which I might add. Many of these earlier paintings are made on very thin, very cheap watercolor paper, which doesn't do you any justice. And it took me a while to realize that I actually had to upgrade my paper in order to even be able to paint better. But yeah, here I've probably tried to fix mistakes. I've probably tried to rub out some of the paint here, only to tear the paper, and then I don't know if I might have gone in with gouache. I guess this was an attempt to approach the subject with a bit more spontaneity and fluidity without having the actual skill and practice in order to pull that off. And this all looks like gouache too. I think I might have tried to fix some of these ugly edges with gouache. Freehand watercolor is really difficult. It takes a lot of practice. Oh my god! What is this? What kind of creature is this? It's the same dog, I might add. She's actually really cute in real life. She does not look like this. It's from July 2018. I did start practicing a bit even back then, but I was a very beginner watercolorist, as you can see. And one of the things that I did early on was I really liked blowing paint around with a straw, which just looks weird. It looks hairy for some reason. Second guessing myself, going in and dabbling with my previous brushwork, trying to rub off some paint on a much too thin paper, adding in little whiskers and eyebrows and hairs with an ink pen, and just ending up with a horrible result like this. I don't want to look at that anymore. This is a pretty recent painting. I mean, the crow is okay. I'm not too fond of the background though. I think this is way too saturated. I'm not really a fan of overly saturated blues or overly saturated colors in general. I think if I could just remove this background, create a more stormy looking sky, more grayish, I would have probably liked it a lot more because the crow is fine. Now, this is a recent attempt at a painting that took me many tries to get right. I eventually did get it right. The finished painting was part of my latest collection. So here we have two ravens, and I really like this composition. I like the placement of them. I've been just struggling to find the right kind of background, the right colors. I don't know what this green is doing here. I don't like the green here at all. I think this might have actually started out quite good, but then as I always do with my backgrounds, I overthink it and I go in and I try to push the colors around and micromanage every brushstroke and eventually just overworking the painting and killing it. This is an older painting. This is from 2020 and it's a field fair. And as you can see, it's been overworked to death. Although I have tried to be a little loose with it. I have tried to splatter some paint around, but then I've ended up being pulled into the details, and I've used a gel pen here to create some weird highlights that I don't even know what those highlights are doing there. Even highlights on the tips of these feathers. Oh my god, so many details that don't need to be there. And this area is all just a muddy mess. I like the beak and the face though. They look fine. And I like this whole line here. But this is an example of where I could have pulled in more contrast here by having a darker background here to emphasize this white edge and a brighter one here on the top side of the bird where it's that the colors are darker. What is it sitting on? Is this a pile of ice? Is this a snowball? What is this? And why does it only have 1 foot? That's kind of weird. Is it standing on 1 leg? I don't know. This is the gray tit from my watercolor birds course actually, but I decided to add in this abstract background after the fact because I wanted to practice. I did not execute it very well. These edges look absolutely horrible, and I am not a fan of this blue color at all. It's way too saturated. Like I said, I'm not a fan of overly saturated backgrounds, which I learned after this failed painting. Luckily, I had already photographed this bird before, and I have a print of this bird on my website without this horrible background, obviously. So I just figured, let's risk it. Let's risk it with an old painting and see if I can pull it off. I did not. And the same goes for this one. This is also a print on my website without the background, just the robin, because the robin is fine. But what is this background? Look at this. Look at the ugly bleeding here, these ugly edges. And you can see how I've second-guessed myself here. I've probably tried to pull a lot of this paint out. Backgrounds are hard. Cool still life, bro. I love what you did with these crumpled up pieces of paper against a very boring yellow background. I think this was actually part of an assignment for a course that I did back in early 2021. Otherwise, I don't think I would have picked crumpled up pieces of paper as my still life subject. I don't know why I chose a black background for this. It looks way too harsh. This shadow is very ugly and way too sharp. I really have not mastered watercolor portraits at all, even though I've practiced a lot, but I find them so difficult. Knowing when to blend my edges and when not to blend my edges, knowing how to place the shadows, when to work wet on wet and when to let it dry in between the layers. It's so hard, so hard. And this is actually a pretty decent attempt to be such an old painting. And here are some of my other earlier watercolor and ink portraits. And this one is okay. I mean, this one is fine actually. It's one of my better ones, even though I would have liked some more contrast. Definitely some more contrast in the clothing and on the face and the hat. It's way too two-dimensional. This is supposed to be Sigourney Weaver, but the likeness is just not there. Same with these other ones. Carrie Fisher. Carrie Fisher. If you don't have the drawing skills to capture someone's likeness, adding watercolor to it is not going to help you. That's kind of the lesson here. I did start these out with drawings and sketches, I'm pretty sure, but I didn't spend enough time on the sketch to make sure that it actually worked, because I am impatient. I like to dive straight in with my paints, and yeah, you're not gonna nail the likeness if you rush past the sketching phase. Oh my god, what is this? I mean, it's a chaffinch, obviously, but what is this painting? The colors are muddy. The background is the ugliest gradient I've probably ever done. And you can see I've gone back in and tried to rub some of the color out because I probably went too dark too soon. The sketch is not very good to begin with. And if you don't have a good sketch, if you don't have an idea of what you are going to do with the painting, where you're going to place the shadows, what you're going to do with the background, and this is what you end up with. Oh, I remember this one. This is one of my earlier attempts to paint more loosely and more spontaneously, hence this paint splatter and the running paint over here, the salt, again with the salt that I just can't seem to get to work. I probably painted this freehand as well, which you can tell because I did not have much practice with painting freehand. The perspective is really weird. This eye is much too small. Yeah, no, it's not a good painting. Moving on. I think this one is actually the subject of one of my earliest videos on this channel where I teach other people how to paint birds. When I was just in the beginning of learning to paint birds myself. This was the level I was at the time. There's no shame in that. It's an okay watercolor bird. Have I painted much better watercolor birds since then? Yes, I have. There's way too little contrast here. This whole beige, the whole body is just a beige lump. There's no real sense of the shape of this body. There should be more shading around the neck, more shading around here where the tail starts, but it's just really flat looking. And then, you know, it would have been nice with a background. It would have been nice with some kind of branch or indication what the bird is sitting on. The placement on the page is a bit weird, almost centered, but not quite. I've always struggled with placement and sizing in my watercolor paintings. I am not very good at painting watercolor landscapes, especially not ones that are supposed to look more finished and not too abstract. The sky is pretty nice. I actually like what I did with the sky, but when it comes to the actual landscape, it just falls flat for me. And this is a typical rookie mistake when it comes to landscape painting, is using these really overly saturated greens that you can't really find in nature, and also making no distinction between different types of greens. I would have liked a cooler green over here in the background. I would have liked a cooler, darker green for these trees here, and then much brighter, warmer greens in maybe in this tree here and in the foreground. That would have created this atmospheric perspective of different color temperatures that landscape painters use to create depth in their paintings. We have a magpie that's really not proportional and weirdly placed on the paper. If I just placed the magpie over here and I made the tail bigger and a lot longer, it would have been a pretty nice magpie actually. Oh my god. Another horrible looking chihuahua. I just cannot with this dog. This is not a good sketch. It's a weird kind of foreshortening that doesn't really come across in this painting. Some things look perfectly normal in the photo, but then when you try to paint it or draw it, it just looks really weird. And that's the case with this. The whole shape of this dog here and how it's foreshortened. The main issue with this painting though is the background and my lack of strategy behind the background. Since this edge of the dog is dark, we have the nose here, we have this eye, we have this darker edge. I would have liked to have a much brighter background here to emphasize that, and I would have liked to make this part of the dog really sharp and in focus, and then the rest of it, the ears for example, and this whole edge here, this edge here, I would have liked them a lot more soft to also to draw in the attention at the focal area, which should be somewhere in the face. But I've gone the complete opposite way. I've just pulled in a lot of dark, saturated, muddy colors right here so that it just kind of blends into the dog, and it looks really, really ugly and messy. So I made an attempt, and this is actually a recent attempt at capturing some yellow hammers in this beautiful winter landscape. I really loved the reference photo, the contrast between the yellow in these birds and the blue of the snow, but I didn't think this painting through at all. I did not know what to do with the background over here. I did not know how to actually paint all this snow, which is why this is all just a mess of branches and blue abstract shapes. I have not practiced painting snow at all, and what I should have done here is make a smaller color study. I should have made a sketch, and I should have practiced painting snow on branches with the correct shadowing, and I should have thought through what I wanted to do with this background. Once again, my impatience is my downfall. Right, one of my very first portraits in oils. I mean, no wonder it's not good, but come on, what is this? He's not been punched bloody in the face. These are my attempts at shadow shapes. Same thing here. This is not a Hitler mustache. It's my attempt at some kind of under the nose shadow. I had no idea how to work oil paints. One of the commenters on my blog, when I did, because I did like a blog challenge when I was learning oil painting, she wrote that it looks like a guy who's been in a fight. And I was like, yeah, you're right. That's what I'm gonna call him. Guy who's been in a fight. Oh gosh, some of my earliest self-portraits. I really hate self-portraiture, okay? I haven't made many self-portraits, as you can probably tell. This is one of my earliest ones. Wow, those are some really bushy eyebrows. And I was wearing glasses at the time. The stereotypical beginner watercolorist type of brushwork where you go in and micromanage every little blotch with a way too small brush because you are scared and you don't know how to handle yourself with water and a brush. And these really flat colors, the gray shading, also a sign of a watercolor beginner. You don't really know how to shade your paintings, so you just add gray and hope for the best. Look at this! What is this? I remember being so embarrassed right after finishing this because I was taking a course. It's a course on Domestica, I think. I don't remember his name. Super talented guy. And the way he does his portraits, watercolor portraits, is by layering on these different colors. And he showed me exactly how to do it. And I did exactly as I imagined. I did exactly what he did. And my painting did not look like his, okay? Let's just leave it at that. And this nose, oh my god, the jaw, the eyes. Holy shit, I did not know how to even draw. That's the main issue with this portrait. I couldn't draw, I couldn't capture my own likeness. And then I tried pulling off this trick that I had just learned, and I didn't know why I was applying these colors in these ways. He was doing it very intuitively and out of many years of practice. When you just imitate another artist like that without knowing the reason why they do what they do, this is kind of what you end up with. You end up with some very weird looking art. And I think I tried something like that with this one too. I tried creating these blue shadows, changed my mind, so I tried to rub some of it off. And also, this neck is way too long and the likeness is not there, and yeah, I didn't know how to draw. And here are some of my very earliest attempts at watercolor birds. I think these are from 2018, probably. The same type of background here. Using a very small brush, going over it endlessly, trying to capture every tiny little detail and still not being satisfied with the amount of detail, so going back in with an ink pen. This is not what you use watercolor for. You don't use it in order to create these sharp, cartoonish looking black outlines, but I didn't know what else to do. I was very green and inexperienced. And this is probably the worst watercolor paper I've ever painted on. I might as well just paint on toilet paper. That's how thin it is. It's one of those pads that came with a watercolor kit, you know, with a palette and some brushes, one of those really cheap watercolor kits. You can't do a good job on paper like that. But it took me a few more years to realize that. I chose grey as the background behind this bird. Interesting choice. Ooh, this is a pissed off looking gull. The beak is barely visible, hardly any color to it at all. It should have been brightly saturated. The eye is much too small, and since the bird is white-ish, I should have had some kind of color in the background. I should have had something to make all of these edges stand out. And way too much micromanagement of the details here, way too many brush strokes. I should have used a larger brush for this, and this edge here should have been a lot stronger. This is just kind of disappearing into the background, and this is why I don't paint florals, because my florals turn out like this. Or did I? I don't even know which way I imagined this. I tried to go into this painting with a mindset of being really loose and a bit abstract with my brush strokes, the way that I see other artists do, artists that are really good at painting florals, but I don't have the instincts to paint florals like this, and so I got totally lost here among all of the folds of this flower. This, I think it's a peony, and I didn't know where to place my shadows and where to place my highlights. And here we have an example of trying to shade a bird that is yellow. This is a gray tit. I chose the completely wrong shade of yellow for this. It's kind of neon-ish. And then I must have used blue here. But when you mix blue and yellow, you get green. So it's just kind of a green tit instead. Awful. I do like a lot of things about this, but the perspective is way off. It's kind of lopsided, and the face is all skewed. It doesn't really look three-dimensional. Did I try to be photorealistic here, or what was I doing? Seriously. And the gel pen, I mean, just stop with this gel pen nonsense. Another one of my very early watercolor bird paintings, and as you can see, I had no idea how to create an even wash, so it's all blotchy and ugly. These birds, they are way too detailed. This is what my very earliest watercolor paintings looked like, because I started out learning watercolor by painting abstracts, and this was my idea of abstract art in the beginning. Pouring a bunch of random colors onto a page and adding lots of water, adding lots of salt, and then just swirling it around and using a straw to blow out these little hairy looking shapes. Yeah, I had no idea what I was doing, but I had lots of fun though, and that was the most important thing. I loved painting stuff like this. I would just go into my room and put on some music and not worry about reference photos, not worry about combining paints or doing things the way I should do, but just having fun with it, just experimenting. This was how I got to know watercolor as a medium, what works and what doesn't work, and what I enjoyed and what I didn't enjoy. And they were a lot of fun. And that's why my watercolor course for beginners incorporates a lot of this type of stuff. Abstract art as a way to get to know this medium, because it's a much better way to get acquainted with this medium compared to attempting something like a portrait or a bird or a landscape or anything that is supposed to look like something, because you put an enormous amount of pressure on yourself when you do that. Well, there you have it. That's my shame drawer. Do you have a shame drawer? I think every artist has a shame drawer or some equivalent to it. Every artist has a shame drawer. Every artist messes up paintings, sometimes a lot. Sometimes you have bad art days for days and weeks on end where it feels like you have forgotten everything you knew, and the pile of shame just grows and grows. And that is fine. I guess that's my reason for making this video. I want to de-shame bad art. I want to normalize bad art and give a more realistic view of what being an artist is like. I'm thinking about following this video up with another one where I actually try to repaint some of these failed paintings just to see if I have actually learned something. Would you enjoy a video like that? Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another one.